Welcome back. President Donald Trump projected to become the 47th president of the United States. Trump boosted by battleground North Carolina's 16 electoral college votes, topping Kamala Harris by nearly 200,000 votes in that state. Joining me now is North Carolina Congressman Greg Murphy, a member of the House Veterans Affairs and Ways and Means Committees. He's also the GOP Doctors Caucus co-chairman. Congressman, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome back. Your reaction?
It's a great night. It was a great night for Donald Trump, a great night for North Carolina. There were some races in North Carolina in the Council of State that did not go our way. You know, I think it was a good evening. It was a mandate, I think, for President Trump because, you know, here he was. He pretty much won every battleground state. And I think America got tired of the divisiveness of Democrats, that you have to be in a certain silo, that you have to be black, you have to be Latino, you have to be LGBTQ or whatever, and that's how they're going to conquer and divide. But I think the message came clear. But Maria, I think most of all these races were about candidates. And I think when you have good candidates, and I think this is a question the Republican Party itself needs to discuss, especially I'll say it here in North Carolina, we have to have candidates that can not only win primaries, but win general elections. And so I think it's a discussion that our party needs to have, not only statewide, but nationwide, about, hey, who is the best person that fits most of what we feel, but may not be so far right, but can actually win general elections. We saw some of this with, you know, their U.S. senators. There are a couple races there that folks were just far extreme that were pushed out, that people just did not want. But I think overall the issues that affected blacks, the issues that affected Latinos, are what carried Donald Trump through the election. Yeah. I'm really happy this morning.
Well, the other thing is that Kamala Harris acted as if the voters, you know, weren't engaged. You know, she didn't answer any questions. She had no answers for very specific, obvious questions like, how will you rein in inflation, the #1 issue?
Yeah.
Why are you saying that you'll secure the border when you haven't secured the border in the last 4 years?
Right.
Every answer was to attack Trump. And then in her closing arguments, basically, she said things that you had to say to yourself, well, wait a minute, that's not what I saw. I mean, in her final commentary this week, she said something like, we all know that Trump is more unhinged, more confused. That's not what people saw of President Trump at all. In terms of her own speaking to voters or not speaking to voters, there's a lesson there as well. People are not stupid.
Yeah, people are not stupid, and she tried to hide in the basement as Joe did. But I will tell you, Maria, word salad is no longer on the menu. You know, we're not serving up word salad anymore.
I like that.
And so, you know, I don't know. Last reports whether she had come out and spoken to her supporters or not. I don't know that. But, you know, here you are. I think I'm going to submit a bill that if a person is going to run for a president, they have to go through a primary. This is ridiculous. She got anointed. Pelosi tried to manipulate this election in every way possible, picking out Joe Biden. I personally think she had some issues dealing with the census in California. I think they should have had at least one less electoral college vote. But they cheat, they lie, they try to steal. But, you know, I think the American people see through all this now. And I pray that, you know, we get the U.S. House too, and we're able to put the nation back on track.
Yeah.
We are in a tailspin right now because of progressive Democratic policies. It's about putting the family first and putting the nation back on track.
Tell me about that tailspin. What's going on in the House, and when do you expect to know if, in fact, the GOP still is in control of the House?
Yeah, so, I mean, just for example, here in North Carolina, the real battleground was in District 1, where Lori Buckout was challenging long-term incumbent for that area anyway, Don Davis. That race is still very, very tight. I don't think it's been called yet. We needed that to retain the House. Whether we are still able to in some of these battleground other states and other districts still remains to be seen. Scott Perry, it looked like, was going to lose last night in Pennsylvania. It looked like he pulled it out. Sadly, we lost a couple good folks in New York, as well as in California, picked up some seats elsewhere. And so, boy, it's going to be a nail biter. And you know, my hope and optimism is that we retain the House, but it's going to be by just a few votes. And if we do, which I pray we do, We need to have some folks who have been bad actors in the Republican Party coming back on board and understand that everything can't be perfect, and that we need to move this nation forward. And if we have all three bodies.
What do you mean bad actors?
Well, we have some folks, and I'll be very plain and simple. The whole McCarthy thing happened because of a personal vendetta.
Right.
And that's a bad actor, if you ask me. That's not what the Republican Party needs. That's pure selfishness. And we I think some folks need some reminders that the people are bringing you there. You don't come to Congress for your own personal gain and for your social media or how many clicks you get on Twitter. I'm so tired of seeing that nonsense by people that say ridiculous, outlandish things and then check their phone to see how many clicks they got on Twitter.
Yeah.
We need to remember that the people there, the people who sent us there, are the ones we're representing.
Right.
And that's what the mission is, and that's what we need to stick by.
And that's why we're looking at this Fox voter analysis, and it found that young men in North Carolina gave Trump a big boost. 57% backed Trump, 41% backed Kamala Harris. The former president also gained support with black male voters, netting 19% of the vote overall. In 2020, he got just 6% of that black male vote. Nearly 70% of families who say they're falling behind financially voted for Trump. And when voters were asked who would better handle the economy, Trump received 49% support compared to Harris's 44%. So this electorate voted with their pocketbook and voted believing that Trump will fix this economy and will fix all of these outsized prices and inflation.
Absolutely. You know, it's the Democratic mantra, don't believe what you see, believe what we tell you. You know, here Pelosi went on one of her usual psychotic rants and said that, oh, Trump is mentally not fit. But she was the same one, remember, just a few months ago that said, oh, Joe Biden is sharp, he's cohesive, he understands all the issues. So, I mean, people don't buy that except at the far left extremes, which they're going to buy in gourd salad anyway. Yeah. So I think this is a resetting of the country. We saw, good Lord, I mean, I spoke at a Trump rally the other day, and I asked a simple question. What would it look like for President Xi to sit across the table from Kamala Harris? I mean, what would that look like? She can't even answer a question by the American press. How would she be pushed by a very, very strong dictator on the other side of the table? Yeah. And I think people understand that. You know, gosh, she turned into be the candidate who never was. And fortunately, people saw through that. Yeah, so. Absolutely.
And people are much more aware of our adversaries and the impact of communist China trying to overtake the United States as the #1 superpower. So, I agree. People were saying, well, how is Kamala Harris going to deal with Xi Jinping? Jonathan, we got to jump it real quick.
Yeah, and just curious, you know, what do you think made the difference for black voters in North Carolina? You know, Barack Obama carried North Carolina, and for some reason, Kamala just hasn't been able to get that same segment of the voters.
Yeah, you know, and it always bothers me that any particular group, color, the amount of melanin in your skin or whatever your gender you pick to be is going to determine your politics. That's absurd. But I think it goes back again to the issues that really matter. The economy, the economy, the economy. Yeah. And she was the deciding vote for the disastrous spending plan. She was, quote, the last one in the room with Afghanistan. Remember, North Carolina is a very strong military state. Yeah. And we did not forget the debacle of Afghanistan.
Great point.
You know, I think Black America is understanding they don't need to feed at the Democratic trough anymore. They have, you know, good, strong-willed individuals and can fight for themselves.
Especially when they're being told not to believe their own eyes. Congressman, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much.